History is not the simple story you were taught. An ancient battery, a map of an undiscovered continent, a gearwork computer from 2,000 years ago. These are out-of-place artifacts, and they challenge everything we think we know about our past. By the end of this exploration, you will see the timeline of human achievement not as a straight line, but as a puzzle with missing pieces. We will examine objects that suggest forgotten technologies and voyages across oceans long before they were thought possible. What does it mean when the physical evidence contradicts the official record? How much of our story is still waiting to be found? These artifacts force us to ask a profound question about our own origins. What if our ancestors knew more than we ever gave them credit for? The term for these puzzling objects is an out-of-place artifact. This phrase was coined to label discoveries that simply do not fit within our established timelines. An out-of-place artifact is more than just an oddity. It is a direct challenge, a piece of evidence that appears on the wrong page of history's book. The field surrounding these finds exists in a fascinating space between rigorous academic study and passionate independent research. On one side, you have archaeologists and historians who approach every new find with cautious scrutiny, their work built upon decades of methodical peer review. For them, an anomalous object often has a more conventional explanation, perhaps a case of mistaken dating, an object that was moved from its original context long after its creation, or sometimes, though rarely, an elaborate hoax. On the other side are researchers and authors who see in these artifacts something far more revolutionary. They argue that our timeline is incomplete, that great civilizations with sophisticated technology rose and fell in deep antiquity, leaving only scattered clues behind. This tension is not a weakness of the field, but its very heart. It is the debate that makes each discovery so compelling. When you look at an out-of-place artifact, you are not just looking at an old object, you are looking at a question. And the answer you lean toward depends largely on which story you find more incredible, that our ancestors were far more capable than we assume, or that every single one of these 30 mysteries has been perfectly explained away. To truly appreciate the weight of each item on our list, we hold this question in mind. But how do we decide what makes the cut? Not every strange find qualifies as a true out-of-place artifact. For this exploration, we applied a specific set of criteria to separate the profound puzzles from the simple curiosities. First, and most importantly, each artifact must have a verified physical existence. It cannot be a story, a legend, or a drawing described in a text. It must be a real object you could theoretically hold in your hands, residing in a museum collection or studied in an academic paper. Second, it needs a documented discovery context, a specific location, and a geological or archaeological layer that gives us a supposed age. An object found in a dealer's shop with no provenance tells us little, but an artifact unearthed from a sealed layer of rock or a dated tomb presents a much stronger challenge. Finally, the object itself must present a clear feature that feels out of time. This could be the material it's made from, a level of craftsmanship, or a piece of knowledge it depicts that simply should not exist in that era according to our current historical understanding. We have deliberately excluded items that are widely accepted by the broader research community as modern hoaxes, where the evidence for fabrication is overwhelming and credible debate has essentially ended. Our focus is on those objects that continue to generate discussion, analysis, and genuine puzzlement among serious researchers. This rigorous selection is crucial. It ensures we are examining genuine historical mysteries, the kind that force us to re-examine our assumptions, rather than getting lost in the realms of pure speculation or acknowledged fiction. These are the artifacts that stand at the edge of our knowledge, silent and stubborn, waiting for an explanation that satisfies both the evidence and the timeline. Our journey begins not on land but at the bottom of the sea. In the year 1900, sponge divers working near the small Greek island of Antikythera made a stunning discovery. Their target was a sunken Roman cargo ship, a treasure trove of statues and ceramics from the 1st century before the Common Era. But among the marble and clay, they pulled up a lump of corroded bronze and wood that seemed utterly unremarkable at first glance. It was crusted with centuries of marine growth, fragile and easily overlooked. For decades, it sat in the back rooms of the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, labeled as a curious but minor find. No one could have guessed that this unassuming object would become one of the most important archaeological discoveries of all time, a device so advanced it would shatter our perception of ancient technology. We now call it the Antikythera Mechanism. When researchers finally began to carefully clean and study the fragmented mass, they saw something impossible. Inside were gears, dozens of them, precisely cut from bronze and arranged in a complex assembly. X-ray and advanced imaging techniques revealed an intricate clockwork machine of staggering sophistication. This was not a simple calendar or a decorative piece. The mechanism was a precise astronomical calculator. By turning a hand crank on the side, its operators could predict the positions of the sun, the moon, and likely the 5 known planets across the zodiac. It could forecast lunar and solar eclipses and even model the irregular orbit of the moon, a subtle motion that requires highly complex gearing to replicate. One of its most astonishing features is a component called a differential gear, an arrangement of gears that allows for the calculation of differences in rotation. This technology was not thought to have been invented until the 16th century, over 1,600 years later. It is the same basic principle found in the axle of a modern automobile. So what does this mean? The Antikythera Mechanism was not a one-off experiment by a lone genius. The craftsmanship implies a tradition, a school of thought dedicated to building such devices. It tells us that a group of Greek scientists and engineers, likely in the city of Rhodes, had achieved a mechanical understanding of the cosmos that history simply forgot. The knowledge required to design and build this machine represents a peak of ancient technology that vanished for centuries. We have no written records describing its creation, no blueprints, no mentions in the historical texts that survived the fall of the classical world. Its very existence poses a quiet, profound question. How much other advanced knowledge was on that ship, or in libraries that burned, or in workshops that were abandoned? The Antikythera Mechanism is a ghost, a tangible echo of a technological path not taken. It forces us to look at the ancient world not as a static portrait of philosophers and simple artisans, but as a dynamic landscape where brilliance could flicker brightly, only to be swallowed by the long shadows of time. If this was what they could build 2,100 years ago, what else might they have known? The silent gears of the Antikythera Mechanism speak of a forgotten precision, but our next discovery hints at a different kind of ancient power, one that seems to flicker with a faint, impossible spark. In a museum in Baghdad rests a collection of objects that look, at first glance, like simple storage jars. They are terracotta pots, each about the size of a fist, sealed with asphalt and containing a copper cylinder and an iron rod. They were unearthed from a 2,000-year-old site in Qujat Rabu, dating back to the Parthian period, a civilization that flourished between what we now call 250 years before the Common Era and 250 years after. To the untrained eye, they are unremarkable relics, but to a modern observer, their construction is eerily familiar. If you were to fill one of these jars with an acidic liquid, something as common as vinegar or grape juice, something readily available in the ancient world, something fascinating happens. The acidic solution acts as an electrolyte, creating a chemical reaction between the copper and the iron. This reaction produces a small but measurable electric charge, around 1 volt. In essence, this simple clay pot becomes a primitive battery. The implications are as puzzling as they are profound. For centuries, the official history of electricity told a clear story, beginning with experiments in the 18th century by figures like Luigi Galvani and Alessandro Volta, who gave his name to the volt. The narrative was linear and European, yet here, sitting quietly in a museum, is physical evidence that a basic electrochemical cell may have been assembled and used roughly 2,000 years earlier in the Middle East. The great mystery is not whether it can produce a charge. We know it can. The enduring question is why? What was its purpose? Researchers have proposed several theories, each opening a window into a possible ancient world far more technologically curious than we assume. One compelling idea is electroplating, the process of using electricity to coat one metal with a thin layer of another, like putting a layer of gold onto a silver object. While no electroplated artifacts from this specific period have been conclusively linked to the batteries, the possibility remains tantalizing. Other suggestions point toward medical applications, where the mild tingling sensation from the charge could have been used in therapeutic practices, a form of early pain management or muscle stimulation. There is also the possibility of a religious or ceremonial use, where the mysterious and invisible force could have been harnessed to create a sense of awe during rituals, perhaps making a metal statue seem to tingle when touched. The debate over its true function may never be fully settled. Some archaeologists argue convincingly that the jars were simply used for storing sacred scrolls, with the metal components serving a structural or symbolic role, and any electrical effect being a happy accident of their materials. This is the beauty and the frustration of the artifact. It does not come with an instruction manual, but its very existence, whether as a deliberate battery or an accidental one, forces a shift in perspective. It asks us to consider that the path of discovery is not a straight, well-lit road, but a landscape dotted with isolated lanterns, some of which glow brightly for a moment before being extinguished by time, their light forgotten until someone stumbles upon the cold glass and metal centuries later. The Baghdad Battery does not rewrite the history books by itself, but it does gently question the narrative. It suggests that the fundamental principles of our world, like the connection between chemical energy and a tiny spark, might have been observed, harnessed, and pondered long before we ever thought to give those forces a name. The concept of ancient flight seems like pure fantasy, a dream reserved for myths like Icarus. Yet a small wooden artifact resting in a museum case in Cairo quietly challenges that assumption. Discovered in 1898 in a tomb near Saqqara, Egypt, this object dates to approximately 200 years before the Common Era. Officially catalogued as a bird model, it looks nothing like the stylized birds found throughout Egyptian art. This object, now known as the Saqqara Bird, possesses a sleek, streamlined fuselage, straight, aerofoil-shaped wings set at a precise angle, and a distinct vertical tail fin. It lacks any carved feathers, eyes, or legs. To a modern eye, the resemblance is uncanny. It looks exactly like a model airplane. This simple piece of carved sycamore wood has become the center of a fascinating debate about the origins of aerodynamic thought. Was it merely a child's toy, a ceremonial piece representing a falcon, or could it be something far more suggestive? In the 1970s, a researcher and flight enthusiast named Dr. Khalil Messiha noted its unusual design. He argued that the tail fin, a feature no bird possesses, was a critical aerodynamic component for stability. His brother, a flight engineer, helped construct a scaled-up model for testing. When placed in a wind tunnel, the model did something remarkable. It generated significant lift. with a slight adjustment to add a small horizontal stabilizer, which Messier believed might have broken off the original. The model exhibited stable glide characteristics. These tests, while not conducted in a formal academic setting, sparked serious questions. Could the ancient craftsmen who carved this object have understood basic principles of flight? The idea is not as far-fetched as it sounds. The Egyptians were master observers of nature, and their culture had a deep reverence for birds in flight, associating them with deities and the soul's journey. It is entirely plausible that centuries of watching hawks and vultures ride thermal currents could have led to intuitive insights about wing shape and air resistance. The artifact could represent a stylized blend of bird and glider, a symbolic object meant to capture the essence of flight itself for ceremonial purposes. Skeptics offer compelling counterpoints. They note the Egyptians produced countless models for tombs, representing everything from boats to bakeries, to serve the deceased in the afterlife. This could simply be a stylized bird, perhaps a falcon, with its legs omitted because it was meant to be mounted on a stand or held. The vertical tail, they suggest, might be a stylized bird's tail feather or a support. The truth likely lies in a space between wonder and practicality. The Saqqara Bird may not be a blueprint for an ancient aircraft, but its existence and its peculiar aerodynamic shape force us to expand our view of ancient innovation. It symbolizes a human fascination with flight that transcends culture and epoch. Whether as a toy tossed by a child, a sacred object placed with care in a tomb, or a craftsman's experiment inspired by watching the sky, it represents a moment of observation crystallized into form. It soars not as proof of ancient aviation, but as a powerful emblem of the timeless human desire to look up, to understand the wind, and to imagine breaking free from the ground. Sometimes a mystery is born not from careful excavation, but from a single, startling crack of a hammer. In the spring of 1961, 3 friends were hunting for geodes in the mountains near Olancha, California. They were searching for the beautiful, crystal-lined stones that form naturally over immense periods. When they found one particularly promising lump, they took a heavy tool to it, expecting the hollow thud and glittering interior of a geode. What they found inside, however, was not crystal. It was a mechanical object. It appeared to be a spark plug. This discovery would become known as the Coso Artifact, and its story is a perfect capsule of how an out-of-place artifact is born, debated, and ultimately lingers in the realm of the unexplained. The object itself was a small cylinder, roughly 2 inches across, with a metal core and a ceramic-like outer shell. A rust-colored, hardened substance encased it completely, resembling the mineral concretion of a very old geode. The initial shock was profound. The men believed they had found a genuine mechanical device sealed inside a stone that, by all geological logic, should have taken hundreds of thousands of years to form. The idea was explosive, a spark plug from an age when humans were not even supposed to exist. It suggested a visitor from another time, or perhaps a forgotten advanced civilization right here on Earth. The artifact quickly gained attention, featured in a popular paranormal magazine of the era. It seemed like the ultimate proof of anachronism, a 20th century piece of technology impossibly trapped in deep time. But as with all good mysteries, closer inspection revealed more complex layers. Several years after its discovery, the object was subjected to more rigorous analysis. Collectors and researchers took detailed X-rays of the encrusted lump. The images revealed not just a simple cylinder, but the clear internal structure of an early 20th century spark plug, specifically a type manufactured by the Champion Company in the 1920s. The ceramic was identified as a type of porcelain used for insulators, and the metal components were consistent with that period. So the mystery was solved, right? Not quite. The enduring puzzle of the Coso artifact is not what it is, but how it got to be the way it was. The central question became, how did a 1920s spark plug become so perfectly and solidly encased in a hard, rock-like nodule? Geologists who examined the case proposed a fascinating natural process called concretion. This is when mineral-rich water deposits layers of hard material like iron oxide and clay around an object over time. In the right conditions, this can happen relatively quickly, on a scale of decades rather than millennia. The spark plug could have been lost or discarded in a wet, mineral-heavy environment, perhaps near the hot springs common to that region of California. Over the years, the minerals would have built up around it, creating a convincing, stone-like shell that mimicked the appearance of a much older geode. This explanation is scientifically plausible and aligns with what we know about concretion processes. Yet, for many, the intuitive leap from a lost tool to a hardened stone egg feels difficult to fully accept. The Coso artifact occupies a unique space in our exploration. It is likely the most explainable item we will encounter, a probable case of a modern object embraced by a rapid geological process. But its value lies precisely in that ambiguity. It perfectly encapsulates the human drama at the heart of every out-of-place artifact story. There is the moment of discovery, charged with the electrifying possibility of rewriting history. Then comes the slow, careful work of analysis, which often introduces a more ordinary yet still fascinating explanation. Finally, there remains that lingering sliver of doubt, that whisper of what if. The Coso artifact teaches us a crucial lesson about this entire field. It reminds us to temper our wonder with scrutiny, to listen to both the gasp of discovery and the quiet voice of geological process. It represents not a failure of the mysterious, but a benchmark. If this object with its compelling backstory can have a conventional explanation, then every other artifact on our list must be held to an even higher standard of evidence. The true mystery it leaves us with is not about ancient spark plugs, but about our own desire to find the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary stone. A hammer should not be a geological mystery, yet one particular tool discovered in the dry landscape of Texas presents a puzzle that seems to defy the very layers of time. In the year 1936, a couple hiking near the town of London, Texas, noticed an odd piece of rock with a piece of wood protruding from it. They took it home and eventually cracked it open. Inside was a hammer, a simple iron head set on a wooden handle. The extraordinary part was the rock itself, identified as a concretion from a Cretaceous rock formation, a stratum laid down over 100 million years ago, in an age when dinosaurs still walked the earth. According to our established timeline, humans and their tools did not exist for another 99.9 million years. The artifact, now known as the London Hammer, forces us to confront an impossible scenario. The hammer's head is made of iron with a surprising degree of purity, showing a craftsmanship that suggests a more advanced metallurgical process than one would expect from a primitive tool. Even more intriguing is the wooden handle, which is not merely old but partially fossilized, its organic material replaced by minerals in a process that typically requires immense spans of time. How could a fully formed, well-made hammer become encased in stone that predates humanity itself? Skeptics offer a compelling and scientifically grounded explanation centered on the process of concretion, the same phenomenon we saw with the Coso artifact. They propose that the hammer was a more recent tool, perhaps from the 19th century, lost or discarded in a mineral-rich creek bed. Over the course of decades, not millennia, dissolved minerals like limestone could have precipitated around it, building up a hard, rock-like shell that mimicked the appearance of ancient stone. The partial fossilization of the wood could be explained by a similar, rapid mineralization process in the right chemical environment. This is a perfectly reasonable, even likely, explanation. Yet, the mystery persists because of the specific context and the details. The rock was identified as belonging to a Cretaceous formation, which, if accurate, places its origin in a deeply ancient context. The purity of the iron also raises questions, as early American frontier blacksmiths typically worked with more impure, brittle iron that showed a distinct grain. The hammer's head lacks this grain, suggesting a different, perhaps more refined manufacturing technique. This is where the artifact lies, in the tension between a neat scientific explanation and stubborn, anomalous details. It does not conclusively prove the existence of humans in the age of dinosaurs, but it does something perhaps more valuable. It highlights the gaps in our understanding of both geology and human history. It asks us to consider the limits of our models. How well do we truly understand the rates of concretion and fossilization under unusual conditions? Could there be rare, rapid geological processes we have yet to fully document? The London hammer is less about rewriting history and more about probing its edges. It serves as a permanent question mark, a reminder that the past is not always neatly sealed in layers, but can sometimes present us with a single, baffling object that refuses to fit comfortably anywhere on our timeline. The boundaries of our timeline are tested not only by technology, but by stories etched in stone. High in the remote mountains of the Bayan Ha Range, near the border of Tibet, a tale emerged that would forever blur the line between archaeological discovery and modern myth. In 1938, a Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pu-te reportedly led an expedition into a series of ancient, interlinked caves. There, they made a startling find: hundreds of stone discs, each roughly 9 inches across, with a perfectly round hole in the center. They resembled large versions of the ceremonial by discs known from Neolithic China, but these were different. A fine, spiral groove ran from the center hole to the outer edge, and upon closer inspection, this groove was said to contain a series of tiny, almost microscopic hieroglyphic characters. The narrative took an even more extraordinary turn when, years later, a researcher claimed to have translated the inscriptions. The story they told was not of ancient kings or rituals, but of a spacecraft that crashed in the mountains long ago. The stranded occupants, a group of beings called the Dropa, were unable to repair their vessel and were eventually accepted by the local tribes. These discs, the translation suggested, were their recorded history. This is the controversial legend of the Dropa Stones. The story captivated a global audience, perfectly aligning with a growing cultural fascination with ancient astronauts and extraterrestrial visitors in our distant past. It presented a physical artifact, a tangible disc that seemed to offer proof of otherworldly contact. However, when we apply the rigorous criteria of an out-of-place artifact, the story begins to unravel. No major museum or academic institution has ever catalogued or displayed these discs. The original archaeologist Kai Pu-te is not verifiable in standard archaeological records of the period. The supposed translations emerged decades after the initial discovery, from sources with unclear credentials, and the discs themselves have never been made available for independent, peer-reviewed analysis. Most scholars in the field of Chinese archaeology view the entire narrative as a complex modern hoax, perhaps born from a misunderstanding or deliberate embellishment of genuine Neolithic discs, which are well-documented ceremonial objects. So why include a story that is widely considered a fabrication? The Dropa stones hold immense value not as a historical artifact, but as a cultural one. They represent a powerful case study in how the mystery of an out-of-place artifact can be amplified and transformed by our deepest desires for explanation. When faced with an object that seems impossibly advanced or out of context, the human mind seeks a narrative that can contain it. In the 20th century, for a portion of the public, the most compelling narrative became one of extraterrestrial intervention. The Dropa legend highlights a critical tension in this entire field. the pull between wanting a mystery to be true and the demanding work of verification. It serves as a cautionary tale, reminding us that extraordinary claims require not just a good story, but unimpeachable evidence, transparent provenance, and scholarly scrutiny. Yet, even as a myth, it speaks to something profound. It reflects an enduring human urge to look at the unexplained and connect it to the cosmos, to wonder if our story is far grander and more interconnected than we ever dreamed. The stones may not be real, but the questions they inspired are very much alive. They ask us to consider how easily a genuine archaeological curiosity can be woven into a larger tapestry of belief, and in doing so, they remind us to hold our wonder in one hand and a healthy skepticism in the other. The legend of the Dropa Stones shows how easily a story can eclipse the evidence, but in the arid hills of Peru, a different collection of stones presents a case where the line between discovery and deception was deliberately blurred. These are the Ica Stones, a set of thousands of andesite rocks, each carved with intricate images that defy conventional history. The scenes depicted are nothing short of astonishing. They show human figures interacting with what look unmistakably like dinosaurs, some in peaceful coexistence, others in dramatic combat. Other stones illustrate complex medical procedures, including detailed heart surgery and what appears to be a cesarean section. Still others map out constellations and celestial bodies with a knowledge that seems impossibly advanced for their supposed age. The story of their origin is as dramatic as the carvings themselves. They were first brought to public attention in the 1960s by a Peruvian physician named Javier Cabrera Darquea, who claimed they were discovered by local farmers in a series of ancient tombs. According to Cabrera, the stones were a recorded library of a lost, hyper-advanced civilization that existed millions of years ago, a civilization that had mastered medicine, astronomy, and lived alongside long-extinct creatures. The implications were staggering, promising to rewrite not just human history, but the entire timeline of life on Earth. For a time, the stones captivated the world, held up as perhaps the ultimate out-of-place artifact collection. The mystery, however, began to unravel under the weight of its own contradictions. The stones lacked any archaeological context, no dirt samples for dating, no associated artifacts found in situ with them. The andesite itself could not be reliably dated through conventional means. Then, in the 1970s, the farmers who had originally supplied the stones came forward with a confession. They admitted to carving the stones themselves, using modern tools and copying images from comic books, textbooks, and popular magazines. To demonstrate, they showed journalists how they could age the fresh carvings by rubbing them with shoe polish and baking them in cow dung to give them an ancient patina. The primary discoverer, Cabrera, acknowledged that many stones were modern forgeries, but he held firm to a core belief that a small percentage of them were genuine ancient artifacts, and that the farmers had simply learned to copy an original, pre-existing style. This is where the Ica Stones transform from a simple hoax into a profound cautionary tale for the entire field. They perfectly illustrate the fine and often invisible line between a genuine mystery and a manufactured myth. The story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about provenance, the documented history of an object from the moment it leaves the ground. Without clear provenance, any artifact, no matter how compelling its imagery, becomes a story without an anchor. The Ica Stones also reveal a deeper human truth. Our powerful desire for the narrative to be real can sometimes override our critical judgment. They show how a charismatic advocate and a visually stunning claim can create a cultural phenomenon that persists long after the evidence has been critically examined. Yet, even in their exposed state, the stones hold a lingering, subtle intrigue. The idea that a few might be genuine, as Cabrera insisted, is nearly impossible to prove or disprove because the well has been so thoroughly poisoned by the admitted forgeries. They exist now in a permanent state of ambiguity, a monument to the vulnerability of historical inquiry. They teach us that the search for out-of-place artifacts is not just a hunt for objects, but a test of our own discernment, a reminder that before we can rewrite history, we must first learn to read the fingerprints left upon it, distinguishing the mark of an ancient artist from the clever stroke of a modern hand seeking to tell us the story we so desperately wish to hear. While stories can be carved in stone, our next mystery is drawn on skin. In the year 1513, an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis put the finishing touches on a world map that would become one of history's most bewildering documents. He crafted it on gazelle skin, using his own extensive naval experience, and as he noted in the margins, a collection of source maps so old they dated back to the time of Alexander the Great. The resulting work is a beautiful and accurate depiction of the western coast of Africa and the eastern coast of South America. But it is the landmass at the bottom of the map that ignites a firestorm of debate, a long, detailed coastline labeled as Antarctica, a continent that would not be officially sighted by European explorers for another 300 years. The Piri Reis Map presents a geographical riddle wrapped in a historical enigma. How could a 16th-century admiral chart a continent buried under miles of ice, a land that would remain hidden from the world until 1820? The map's depiction of this southern land is not a vague, imagined shape. It shows a coastline with bays, inlets, and river estuaries, features that correspond remarkably well with modern seismic surveys of the continent's true topography beneath its glacial sheet. This suggests the map was not showing the icy wasteland we know today, but rather Antarctica as it might have appeared thousands of years ago, during a period when its coasts were free of ice and exposed to the air. The implications are staggering. They point to the existence of a sophisticated, seafaring civilization capable of mapping the world in deep antiquity, long before the rise of classical Greece or Rome. Piri Reis himself credited his sources to older charts, some from ancient Greek libraries in Alexandria and others, perhaps, from even earlier Phoenician or Arabic navigators. This hints at a chain of knowledge, a precious cargo of geographical data passed down through libraries and copying rooms for millennia, surviving the fall of empires only to surface in the hands of an Ottoman scholar. Skeptics offer a compelling alternate reading. They suggest the landmass could be a speculative, composite interpretation of rumored southern lands, perhaps blending the coast of South America with distorted reports of Tierra del Fuego. They also note that the map contains known inaccuracies, placing Brazil too close to Africa. Yet, the specific, non-intuitive details of the Antarctic coastline remain difficult to dismiss as pure guesswork. The map does not prove that ancient sailors circumnavigated a green Antarctica, but it stands as a powerful testament to lost knowledge. It represents the ghost of a library, a single surviving page from a vast atlas of the ancient world that has otherwise turned to dust. It asks us to consider the vast stretches of human history about which we know nothing, periods when explorers with different names and forgotten ships might have sailed farther and mapped more precisely than we ever believed possible. The Piri Reis Map is a whisper from a time before the ice, a silent challenge that suggests our planet's last great continent may not have been the last to be discovered, but merely the last to be forgotten. A map can chart a forgotten coastline, but a book can contain an entire lost world. In a vault at Yale University rests perhaps the most famous unsolved literary puzzle on the planet, the Voynich Manuscript. This handwritten codex, bound in vellum, is a beautiful and utterly bewildering artifact. Since its modern rediscovery in 1912, it has resisted every attempt at translation, standing as a silent monument to the human drive to encode meaning. Carbon dating places its creation firmly in the early 15th century, somewhere in Europe, but from that point forward, every single page defies explanation. The manuscript is written from left to right in an elegant, flowing script of approximately 20 to 30 unique characters, arranged into what look like words and sentences. This is not a known language, it is not a known cipher. It is an entirely original system of writing, and to this day, no one knows what it says. The text is accompanied by lavish, colorful illustrations that only deepen the mystery. There are pages filled with bizarre, unidentifiable plants, lush and twisting with leaves and roots that resemble nothing in any known botanical manual. Other sections show intricate astronomical charts featuring unfamiliar constellations and celestial diagrams with suns, moons, and stars arranged in impossible configurations. Perhaps most haunting are the so-called biological sections, which depict small, nude female figures bathing in or connected by intricate networks of tubes and vessels to strange, organic-looking structures, suggesting a mysterious, symbolic physiology. The cumulative effect is one of profound disorientation. You are looking at a book that clearly contains vast, organized information, a work that must have taken its author years of dedicated effort to produce. Yet its content remains perpetually out of reach, a secret locked behind a door for which we have never found the key. The theories about its purpose are as varied as they are compelling. Some researchers believe it to be an elaborate, meaningless hoax, created to defraud a wealthy Renaissance patron with a promise of secret knowledge. Others argue it represents a constructed language or an encoded cipher meant to protect genuine alchemical, herbal, or astrological secrets from the church or rival scholars. More recent computational analyses suggest the text possesses linguistic patterns consistent with a real, natural language, further muddying the waters. This is not a simple case of forgotten words. It is a complete system of communication that has vanished without a key. The Voynich Manuscript does more than challenge history. It challenges our very relationship with knowledge itself. It is a physical reminder that understanding is not guaranteed, that entire systems of thought can be rendered opaque by time. It represents the ghost of a conversation we can no longer hear, a library of ideas whose catalogue has been lost. In a world where we believe almost anything can be decoded with enough data, the Voynich stands as a stubborn, beautiful counterpoint. It asks us a humbling question: how many other volumes of human thought have been lost not to fire or decay, but simply because the last person who understood how to read them took that knowledge with them when they passed? This book is not merely a collection of unreadable pages, it is a mirror. We stare into its strange illustrations and cryptic text, and we see our own relentless curiosity reflected back, our endless desire to find meaning in the patterns, even when the language of the universe remains stubbornly, beautifully unknown. A single silver coin can rewrite a map. In the year 1957, during an archaeological dig at a Native American settlement site in the state of Maine, a discovery was made that seemed quietly out of place. Among the stone tools and pottery fragments, excavators unearthed a small, worn silver penny. At first glance, it was assumed to be a colonial-era coin, perhaps lost by an early English settler. But when experts examined it, they realized it was something far older and far more significant. This was a Norse coin, minted between the years 1065 and 1080 of the Common Era, during the reign of King Olaf Kyrre of Norway. Known as the Maine Penny, this tiny artifact is the only pre-Columbian Norse object ever found in the United States outside of the confirmed Viking settlement at Elance Aux Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada. Its presence in a 12th century Native American context, hundreds of miles to the south, ignites a profound question about the true reach of Viking exploration. The settlement at Elance Aux Meadows, discovered in the 1960s, proved the Norse had indeed reached North America, likely using it as a seasonal base for gathering timber and other resources. The sagas speak of lands farther south, a place they called Vinland, but concrete evidence for these voyages had always been elusive. The Maine Penny is that evidence, a whisper of contact that extends the Norse footprint. How did this coin travel from a mint in Norway to a coastal settlement in Maine? The most compelling theory is one of indirect trade. The coin was found not at a Viking camp, but at a site of the Penobscot Nation, a people with extensive trade networks along the eastern seaboard. It is possible that Norse explorers, perhaps from a ship blown off course or probing southward from their Newfoundland base, made contact with indigenous groups. In such an encounter, a silver coin, likely carried as raw bullion to be cut for payment rather than used as currency, could have been traded for food, furs, or other goods. From there, through the intricate web of native trade that moved shells, copper, and other valuables across vast distances, the coin could have traveled far from its original point of entry, passed from hand to hand over generations until it was finally lost or deliberately placed at the main site. This theory of down-the-line trade is supported by the coin's condition. It is heavily worn, suggesting it circulated for a long time, perhaps as a curiosity or a piece of decorative metal, long after anyone remembered its distant origin. Skeptics offer an alternative that the coin is a modern intrusion, accidentally dropped at the site by a collector or introduced during the excavation itself. However, the archaeological team maintained meticulous records, and the coin was found in a layer securely dated to the 12th century, making a modern loss highly unlikely. The Maine Penny does not point to a Norse village in New England, but it does something perhaps more fascinating. It hints at the ephemeral nature of first contact, a fleeting meeting on a shoreline that left only this one resilient token behind. It suggests that the Norse exploration of North America was not a single, failed colony, but a series of wider, sporadic voyages whose full scope has been erased by time. This single coin transforms the Viking saga from a story of one settlement into a broader, more mysterious narrative of tentative probes into a vast new world, encounters that flickered briefly in the historical record before vanishing, leaving behind only a small, silver question in the dirt. Aluminum is a metal of the modern age. Its widespread use defines our world, from aircraft to soda cans, all made possible by an industrial electrolytic process invented in the 1880s. This timeline makes the discovery of a single wedge-shaped object in Romania utterly perplexing. In 1974, construction workers digging a trench near the town of Aiud uncovered something unexpected. Buried deep in a layer of sand, approximately 35 feet down, they found 3 objects. 2 were mastodon bones, ancient relics of a long-extinct elephant-like creature. The third was a heavy, wedge-shaped piece of metal covered in a thick layer of oxide. It was initially assumed to be a stone axe head and set aside with the bones. Years later, a researcher decided to clean the object and had it analyzed. The results were shocking. The wedge was composed of an alloy, primarily aluminum, with traces of 11 other metals including copper, zinc, and silicon. This was not a natural nugget of pure aluminum, which is vanishingly rare in nature. This was a manufactured alloy, a material that requires a sophisticated, high-temperature industrial process to create. The geological layer where it was found, alongside those mastodon remains, suggested an age of around 11,000 years. This is the core of the Aiud Wedge mystery. How does a piece of advanced metallurgy end up buried in the same ancient context as Ice Age megafauna? The implications are as stark as they are simple. If the dating is correct, then an unknown culture possessed the knowledge to produce complex aluminum alloys millennia before the official dawn of metallurgy. The wedge itself is intriguing. It weighs about 5 pounds, with 2 holes drilled through it and signs of wear along its edges, as if it had been part of a larger mechanical assembly, perhaps a tool or a component that experienced significant friction. Its shape is aerodynamic, leading some to speculate wildly about its function, but its practical design is undeniable. Skeptics have proposed several more conventional explanations. The most common is that the wedge is a much more recent object, a piece of modern excavation or drilling equipment, perhaps from a 19th century mining operation or even a World War II aircraft part that somehow became embedded in the older layer. They argue that the stratigraphy, the study of the soil layers, could have been disturbed, or that the object fell into a fissure and was later covered over, creating a false association with the much older mastodon bones. Proponents of its antiquity, however, point to the thick, uniform layer of oxide coating the wedge, which they argue would have taken a considerable amount of time to form in that environment, and the testimonies of the workers who insist the layer was undisturbed when they found it. The debate often circles back to a single, frustrating point. The original discovery was not made by trained archaeologists. The context, while compelling, lacks the meticulous documentation that would allow scientists to definitively rule out intrusion or disturbance. The Aiud Wedge thus exists in a state of permanent ambiguity. It is a physical paradox, a symbol of the industrial age found in the soil of the Stone Age. It does not demand that we believe in ancient aluminum factories, but it does insist that we question the completeness of our historical narrative. It represents a single, stubborn data point that refuses to fit the curve, a metallic whisper from a deep time that suggests the story of human technological progress may have hidden chapters, written in alloys we thought we invented ourselves, and then quietly lost for thousands of years. A story carved in stone can be the most durable kind of history or the most convincing kind of fiction. In the autumn of 1898, a Swedish immigrant farmer named Olof Öhman was clearing trees on his property near Kensington, Minnesota. As he uprooted a poplar tree, he found its roots tightly gripping a large, flat slab of greywacke stone. When he pulled it free and brushed away the dirt, he saw markings, a grid of strange symbols cut deep into the rock. It was a rune stone, a type of memorial common in medieval Scandinavia, but this one was thousands of miles from any known Viking settlement. The inscription, written in a mix of runic letters and coded numerals, told a harrowing tale. It stated that a party of 8 Goths or Swedes and 22 Norwegians on an exploration journey from Vinland had camped here. The text goes on to describe a tragic event, that 10 men were red with blood and dead, and it asks the Virgin Mary to save them from evil. Most astonishingly, it bore a date, 1362. This was the Kensington Runestone, and if genuine, it promised to shatter the narrative of American history. It suggested that Norse explorers, nearly 130 years after the settlement at Elant's Oaks Meadows was abandoned, had not only returned to North America, but had ventured deep into the continent's interior, reaching what is now the American Midwest. The implications were monumental, pointing to sustained contact and exploration far beyond a few coastal way stations. The stone ignited a firestorm that has burned for over a century, a perfect case study in the conflict between academic consensus and passionate local belief. From the start, most professional linguists and historians dismissed it. They argued the runes were an anachronistic mix, containing symbols and grammatical forms that did not align perfectly with 14th century Scandinavian language. The very phraseology, some experts claimed, bore the mark of a 19th century mind, someone familiar with runes but not a native user of the medieval tongue. The prevailing academic view is that the stone is a clever, heartfelt creation by Scandinavian immigrants, perhaps Olof Öhman himself or someone in his community, a piece of folk art meant to carve their own heritage into the new landscape of America, to claim a deep, noble history in a land that often treated newcomers as outsiders. This explanation is emotionally and culturally coherent, yet defenders of the stone point to physical evidence that is difficult to dismiss. geologists who have examined the inscription note the deep, weathered grooves of the carving. They argue that the weathering patterns, the way the stone itself had aged within the cuts, suggests the inscription is much older than the late 1800s. Some linguistic analyses, though contested, have pointed to subtle nuances in the rune forms and word choices that could be consistent with a genuine medieval artifact. The stone, for many in the local community and for independent researchers, is not a hoax but a relic, a genuine message left by frightened, stranded explorers far from home. This artifact embodies a deeper tension in the search for truth. It sits at the intersection of two powerful human drives: the rigorous, sometimes skeptical pursuit of verifiable fact, and the deep, personal need for connection to a grander narrative. For academia, the stone fails certain tests of linguistic purity. For its defenders, it passes the test of physical presence and emotional resonance. The Kensington Runestone does not offer easy answers. Instead, it asks us to consider the weight we give to different kinds of evidence. Do we trust the abstract analysis of language more than the tangible analysis of stone? Can local legend, passed down with care, hold a kernel of truth that formal history has overlooked? The stone remains where it was found, now housed in a museum in Alexandria, Minnesota, a silent monument to a story that refuses to be settled. It represents the enduring power of a single object to divide opinion and inspire devotion, a slab of rock that is either a beautiful fraud or a lonely, weathered gravestone for a history we have yet to fully write. From a single carved stone, we move to an entire landscape transformed into a question. Scattered across the arid plains of southern Peru, the Nazca Lines are not objects you can hold, but they are perhaps the ultimate out-of-place artifact in terms of sheer, breathtaking scale. Created by the Nazca culture between 500 years before the Common Era and 500 years after, these geoglyphs are a gallery etched directly into the desert floor. They consist of hundreds of figures, from perfectly straight lines that run for miles to immense geometric shapes, spirals, and trapezoids. Most astonishing are the biomorphs, colossal drawings of animals and plants, including a hummingbird, a spider, a monkey, and a whale, some stretching over 600 feet across. Their existence presents a dual mystery, one of engineering and one of intent. The desert here is a unique canvas, a layer of dark, oxidized pebbles over a lighter subsoil. The Nazca people created these images simply by removing the top layer of stones, revealing the contrasting pale earth beneath. The lines have survived for millennia because the region is one of the driest on Earth, with almost no rain or wind to erode them. But the preservation is only the beginning of the puzzle. The true wonder is that these precise, sprawling designs are only fully comprehensible from a vantage point high in the air. From ground level, you see only a shallow groove or a dusty path wandering across the plain. To perceive the hummingbird's wing or the monkey's curled tail, you must ascend. This fact has fueled endless speculation, most famously the idea that they were landing strips or signals for ancient astronauts. This dramatic theory, however, overlooks the profound human ingenuity actually at play. Researchers have demonstrated that the Nazca could have created these massive figures using simple surveying techniques. With a series of stakes and ropes working from a small-scale model, they could have scaled up the designs with remarkable accuracy. The straight lines could have been made by sighting along aligned posts. The real, enduring mystery is not how, but why. Why would a culture invest such immense, coordinated effort into creating art they could never see as a whole? The leading theories point to a deep, spiritually motivated purpose. Many lines align with celestial events like the solstice sunset, suggesting an astronomical calendar etched into the earth, connecting the people to the cycles of the heavens. Others see them as ritual pathways where communities walked along the lines during ceremonies to invoke water from the gods, a desperate and hopeful act in an unforgiving desert. The animal figures likely held deep symbolic meaning, representing constellations or clan deities. The lines may have been a form of communication, but not with beings in the sky, with the divine forces of their own world. They were a permanent prayer, a sacred landscape meant to be seen by the gods from above. The Nazca Lines challenge our understanding not by showcasing impossible technology, but by revealing a world view so different from our own. They represent a society that conceived of its relationship with the cosmos on a monumental, geographical scale. Their legacy is a reminder that human purpose can be vast and patient, that a community's most important work might be a message meant for the sky, a testament to faith written so large it would take 1,000 years for the rest of the world to even find the page. The desert prayers of the Nazca are written for the sky, but in a shadowed temple along the Nile, a different kind of image seems to capture a spark of human invention. Within the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, on a wall relief carved over 2,000 years ago, there is a scene that stops modern visitors in their tracks. It shows a large, elongated object shaped like a bulb or a vase. Inside this object rests a snake, its body stretched out in a straight line with its head pointed toward one end. This snake is enclosed within what looks like a glass container held aloft on a pillar. A cable, depicted as a twisting vine, runs from the base of this object to a small box, which is being gripped by a kneeling figure. To any observer living in the age of electricity, the resemblance is startlingly direct. It looks for all the world like an ancient diagram of a light bulb, complete with a filament, a socket, and a power source. This interpretation has become known as the Dendera Light, and it has ignited one of the most visually compelling debates in alternative history. Proponents point to the uncanny parallels, the bulbous shape, the filament-like snake, the insulating pillar, and the cable leading to what could be interpreted as a battery or generator. They ask, could this be evidence of a forgotten technology, a way for the ancient Egyptians to illuminate their deepest tombs and temples without the soot of torches or the flicker of oil lamps? The idea is powerful, suggesting a hidden chapter where priest engineers harnessed a force we consider modern. Mainstream Egyptology, however, offers a profoundly different and deeply symbolic reading. Scholars explain that the relief is part of a well-understood mythological sequence. The object is not a light bulb, but a lotus flower, a sacred symbol of creation and rebirth. The snake emerging from it represents the god Harsomptus, a manifestation of the sun god, and the entire scene depicts the moment of cosmic creation, the emergence of light and life from the primordial waters. The twisting cable is not a wire but the stem of the lotus, and the box is a jed pillar, a symbol of stability held by a protective deity. In this context, the image is not a technical schematic, but a spiritual one, illustrating the birth of the sun itself from a celestial flower. These two interpretations stand in stark contrast, one technological, the other mythological. Yet, the enduring fascination with the Dendera relief speaks to something deeper than a simple debate over symbols. It highlights the fundamental way we view the past through the lens of our own present. We live in a world defined by electrical light, so when we see an ancient carving that resembles its components, our minds naturally make that connection. The ancient Egyptians lived in a world defined by powerful, interlocking myths, where the sun's journey was a daily drama of death and rebirth, and their art was a language to describe that sacred order. The relief does not likely prove the existence of ancient light bulbs, but it does prove the incredible power of human symbolism to convey complex ideas about energy, creation, and illumination. Whether as a metaphor for divine light or a literal diagram of a lost invention, the image at Dendera serves the same ultimate purpose, to depict the miraculous conquest of darkness. It reminds us that every culture seeks to explain and harness the fundamental forces of their world, and they do so with the vocabulary they understand best, be it the language of gods or the blueprint of a machine. Deep in the jungles of Costa Rica, a different kind of mystery lies scattered across the landscape, one of pure, silent geometry. During the 1930s, as the United Fruit Company cleared land for banana plantations in the Diquís Delta, workers began to uncover something astonishing beneath the roots of ancient trees, perfectly round stone spheres. They were not just a few curious rocks, but hundreds of them, ranging in size from a few inches to colossal orbs over 6 feet in diameter and weighing more than 15 tons. Crafted from a hard stone called granodiorite, these spheres are not merely round, they are unnervingly precise, with surfaces smoothed to a near-perfect spherical shape that challenges our understanding of pre-Columbian craftsmanship. Their creators were the Diquís culture, a society that flourished from around 800 years after the Common Era until the Spanish arrival. Yet, despite knowing who made them, the spheres present a trilogy of unanswered questions that echo through the jungle. How were they made? How were they moved? And most importantly, why were they placed? The method of their creation is a feat of patient engineering. Without metal tools, the Diquís people likely used a combination of controlled heating with fire and rapid cooling with water to fracture large boulders, then painstakingly pecked and ground them into shape using other, harder stones. The final smoothing, achieving that breathtaking symmetry, would have required generations of dedicated artisans passing down a precise, tactile knowledge. Then came the problem of transportation. Some of the largest spheres were quarried miles from where they were ultimately positioned. Moving a 15-ton stone sphere through dense rainforest, across rivers, and over uneven terrain is a logistical puzzle that hints at sophisticated social organization, likely using a system of ropes, log rollers, and earthen ramps, a monumental communal effort. But the purpose remains the most tantalizing mystery. Some spheres were found arranged in alignments, leading to theories that they functioned as astronomical markers, mapping celestial events or serving as a giant calendar. Others were placed in prominent positions near chief dwellings or burial sites, suggesting they were symbols of power, territorial markers, or representations of celestial bodies in a cosmological map. A few were even found grouped in patterns that mirror constellations. What makes the spheres so compelling is their silent testimony to a culture whose grand narrative was lost to time. They were not built to be a city or a temple, but as a landscape of meaning, a physical language of stone whose grammar we can no longer read. They underscore a profound truth in our exploration, that engineering skill and abstract thought flourished in cultures often relegated to the footnotes of grand historical narratives. These spheres are not crude artifacts, they are monuments to precision, cooperation, and a deep desire to impose perfect order on the natural world, a desire that rolled patiently and mysteriously through the heart of the Central American jungle. Gold can capture more than wealth, it can capture a form. In a museum in Bogotá, a collection of small, intricate figurines crafted by the Quimbaya culture of Colombia presents a visual riddle that has divided observers for decades. Dating from roughly 300 to 1,550 years of the Common Era, these artifacts are masterpieces of pre-Columbian metallurgy, made using the lost wax casting technique. To the archaeologists who study them, their forms are clearly representative of the natural world, stylized depictions of insects like beetles or dragonflies, birds in flight, or even stylized amphibians. The artists simplified and exaggerated features, creating elegant, flowing shapes meant to be worn as pendants or used in ceremonies. Yet when a modern eye falls upon them, something else emerges. Several of these figurines possess a sleek, aerodynamic body, a pair of swept-back delta wings that angle sharply toward the rear, and what looks unmistakably like a vertical tail fin or stabilizer. The silhouette is so familiar that it seems to leap across centuries, resembling nothing so much as a modern jet aircraft or even a space shuttle. This visual echo is so powerful it has fueled a compelling, if controversial, narrative. Could the Quimbaya artists have seen, and then meticulously reproduced in gold, forms of advanced flying machines? The theory is seductive, suggesting contact with a technology far beyond their time, perhaps even pointing to the same kind of forgotten knowledge or visitors that other artifacts hint at. It connects a deep human desire to find our own world reflected in the past. However, the more widely accepted interpretation invites us into a different, equally fascinating kind of discovery, one about perception itself. Scholars of Quimbaya art point to the culture's profound connection to their environment. Their artistry was not about literal replication, but about capturing the essence, the spirit, and the movement of the creatures they observed. A beetle's hard shell and powerful wings could be abstracted into a smooth, streamlined body. A bird's dive could be frozen into a shape with swept-back wings for speed. The so-called tail fin could be an artistic representation of a creature's tail, a stylized leg, or simply a structural support for the pendant to hang correctly. The resemblance to aircraft is, in this view, a remarkable coincidence of form following function in both nature and human engineering. A jet plane is sleek and winged to efficiently move through the air, and so too are many birds and insects. The Quimbaya artists, through generations of observation, arrived at an abstract form that embodies aerodynamic principles, not because they knew the math, but because they recognized the shape of speed and flight in the living world around them. These golden objects therefore sit at a beautiful crossroads. They challenge us to ask what we are truly seeing when we look at ancient art. Are we projecting our own technological reality onto a symbolic language we no longer fully understand? Or does their form hint at a universal understanding of principles that both nature and advanced engineering must obey? The Quimbaya artifacts do not likely prove ancient aviation, but they prove something perhaps more profound about human creativity. They show how observation of the natural world can lead to forms of timeless elegance, shapes so perfect that they resonate across millennia, speaking equally of a beetle's shell, a bird's wing, and humanity's dream of flight. They are a mirror, and what we see in them says as much about our own time as it does about the world of the artists who held the wax and poured the gold. A perfect cube should not exist inside a lump of coal. Yet in 1885, at a foundry in the small Austrian town of Wolfsegg, a worker splitting a freshly mined block of tertiary-era coal discovered exactly that. Encased within the dense black carbon was a solid cube of iron, roughly 2 inches on each side, with a deep groove circling its midsection and rounded edges. The coal seam from which it came was ancient, dating to a period millions of years before the emergence of humanity. The discovery sent immediate ripples of excitement through those fascinated by the anomalous. Here was an object of unmistakably geometric, manufactured appearance, seemingly locked in a temporal prison of prehistoric plant matter. The Wolfsegg iron, as it came to be known, was quickly hailed as a quintessential out-of-place artifact, a metallic anachronism that defied the entire narrative of human technological development. Its smooth faces and intentional grooves suggested the work of a toolmaker, not a random act of nature. If this cube was as old as the coal that held it, then who could have made it? The implications pointed toward an unimaginable antiquity for human industry, or perhaps the presence of another, unknown intelligence on Earth in the deep past. For decades, it served as a cornerstone of the argument for forgotten advanced civilizations, a physical exhibit in the case for rewriting history. The cube's journey, however, takes a critical turn that defines so much of this field. As its fame grew, it attracted more rigorous scientific scrutiny. Researchers subjected the object to detailed metallurgical analysis. While initial tests suggested it was not standard meteoric iron, which often contains high levels of nickel, later and more comprehensive studies revealed its true composition. The cube was made of cast iron, a material produced in blast furnaces. Furthermore, the specific shape and the groove around its center were identified as consistent with a common piece of 19th century mining equipment, likely a broken support rod or a weight from mining machinery. The most plausible explanation emerged not from deep time but from recent history. A piece of mining equipment from a much earlier, perhaps abandoned, shaft could have fallen or been discarded into a crevice. Over time, geological processes, including the slow, constant pressure that forms coal, could have encased the metal object in a new layer of coal-like material, creating a false association of immense age. The original discovery was not made by geologists in a controlled dig, but by a worker at a foundry, a context where the precise stratigraphy was impossible to verify. The wolf's egg iron, therefore, transformed from a world-shaking mystery into a powerful lesson. It stands not as proof of ancient smiths in the age of giant mammals, but as a testament to the necessity of methodical analysis. Its story encapsulates the entire cycle of an out-of-place artifact narrative, the thrilling discovery, the rush of radical interpretation, and then the slow, often less dramatic, work of science that provides a more conventional answer. Yet, even with this resolution, the cube retains its place in the literature. It serves as a permanent reminder of a crucial principle: the need to separate the wonder of the initial find from the disciplined process of verification. It asks us to hold two ideas in balance: the open-mindedness to consider extraordinary possibilities, and the intellectual humility to follow the evidence, even when it leads back to a simpler, more familiar world. The cube's true value is not in challenging the timeline, but in challenging us to be better, more careful detectives of the past. 2.8 billion years is a span of time the human mind can barely grasp. It is an epoch before multicellular life, before the first simple cells, a period when Earth itself was a young, violent world. In deposits of a mineral called pyrophyllite in South Africa, miners have unearthed objects that seem to belong to this inconceivable deep time. They are known as the grooved spheres, and over 200 of these small, metallic objects have been recovered. Each is roughly spherical, often no larger than a marble or a small walnut, and each bears a precise, uncanny feature: 3 parallel grooves etched perfectly around its equator, as if drawn by a compass. They are composed of a nickel-steel alloy that does not occur naturally, and they are found embedded within rock layers dated to 2.8 billion years ago. This places their formation in an era when, according to all established science, the only activity on our planet was geological and chemical, a world of volcanoes, sterile oceans, and a toxic atmosphere. There were no plants, no animals, not even the simplest bacteria as we know them today. So what are these precisely grooved metallic spheres doing there? The official geological explanation is one of natural concretion. This is a process where minerals precipitate from water and build up in layers around a central nucleus, sometimes forming spherical nodules. The grooves, according to this view, could be the result of crystalline structure in the surrounding rock exerting pressure on the forming sphere, or perhaps a later geological process that etched lines into a softer outer layer that has since worn away. Geologists point out that nature is capable of producing astonishingly regular forms, from the hexagonal columns of basalt to perfect crystal geometries. The spheres, while unusual in their metallic composition and grooves, could represent a rare but natural phenomenon, a quirk of mineralogy in the ancient Earth's crust. Yet, for those who study out-of-place artifacts, the grooved spheres present a challenge of a different magnitude. Their uniformity is striking, not just in shape, but in the specific, intentional seeming detail of those 3 equatorial grooves. While nature produces spheres, it does not typically engrave them with such consistent parallel lines. Their abundance, over 200 found, also argues against them being a singular, freak occurrence. They feel, in their sheer numbers and repeated design, like a product of a process, whether natural or otherwise. These objects push the very definition of an artifact to its limit. The word artifact implies something made by human hands, but at 2.8 billion years, humanity is not just absent, it is an impossibility measured in billions of years of future evolution. This forces the question into a truly profound space. If they are not natural concretions, then what agency could have produced them? The speculation ventures into realms far beyond conventional history, touching on possibilities of a non-human, perhaps even non-biological, intelligence that might have been present on Earth in its unimaginably distant past, or perhaps a sign of a technological civilization from another world that left these enigmatic markers behind. It is a thought that stretches the boundaries of science and imagination alike. Ultimately, the grooved spheres may be the ultimate litmus test for how we interpret anomaly. They represent the farthest frontier of the out-of-place artifact concept, where the timeline is so vast that our standard categories of maker and material break down completely. Whether as a testament to nature's hidden capacity for near-perfect geometry or as a silent token from a time before time, they serve one undeniable purpose. They compel us to look at the oldest rocks under our feet and wonder, with a humbling and expansive curiosity, what other stories they might contain, written not in fossil but in formed metal and enigmatic grooves. Buried in a tomb beneath a Mexican pyramid, a small terracotta face stares out with features that do not belong. In 1933, archaeologists excavating a burial at the site of Calixtlahuaca in the Toluca Valley made a perplexing discovery. Among the pre-Columbian offerings, they unearthed a terracotta head, just a few inches tall. Its style was immediately alien to the region. It depicted a bearded man with distinctively European features, wearing a type of soft cap known as a pileus, commonly worn in the classical Mediterranean world. The burial itself was sealed beneath an undisturbed pyramid structure, and the associated artifacts dated it firmly to a period between the 12th and 14th centuries, long before any documented European voyage to the Americas. This is the Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca Head, and it presents a small, silent challenge with enormous implications. Stylistic analysis by several art historians has pointed toward a Roman origin, possibly from the 2nd century of the Common Era. If this assessment is correct, and if the head was genuinely placed in that tomb by its original builders, then it is a smoking gun for transoceanic contact, a Roman artifact somehow making its way to central Mexico over 1,000 years before Columbus. The idea is electrifying, suggesting a lone Roman ship blown off course, or perhaps a longer, forgotten chain of trade that spanned the Atlantic. Such a find would force a complete re-evaluation of the isolation of the ancient Americas. However, as with all such artifacts, the debate is layered and complex. Skeptics raise crucial questions about the excavation's documentation, which, while generally accepted, was not conducted with the meticulous precision of modern archaeology. They propose the possibility of intrusion, that the head could be a colonial-era object, perhaps brought by a Spanish settler who had a curiosity for classical antiquities, and that it somehow found its way into an older context through a rodent burrow or a later disturbance that was not immediately apparent. The head's composition has been analyzed, showing it is made from local clay, but this does not definitively rule out a colonial origin, as a Spanish artist could have used local materials to create a replica of a Roman piece. The head thus sits at the center of a perfect storm of historical possibility. It is not large, not grand, but its very presence in that specific place asks a profound question about the permeability of the ancient world. Could the oceans, which we imagine as vast, uncrossable barriers, have been occasionally breached by chance or by daring? The head does not demand that we believe in a Roman colony in Mexico, but it does whisper of the unpredictable nature of human movement. A single ship, a single trader, a single object carried across the world as a curiosity could leave behind this one fragile clue. Its legacy is not a rewritten history book, but a deepened sense of mystery about the countless unrecorded journeys, the stories of exploration and loss that left no written record, only a small terracotta question mark gazing out from the darkness of a tomb. Remote mountains often guard the strangest secrets. In the Qinghai province of China, near the desolate slopes of Mount Baigong, a story emerged of ancient pipes. According to reports, explorers found iron pipes of various diameters embedded directly into the solid rock of the mountain. Some were scattered across the surface, while others were said to run deep into the stone, with a few even reportedly leading toward the shores of a nearby saltwater lake. The pipes were described as startlingly uniform, appearing in straight sections and at right angles, a geometry that feels deeply intentional to the human eye. When samples were analyzed, the material was identified as primarily iron oxide, with a significant silicon dioxide content. The suggested ages for these formations were staggeringly ancient, some reports even venturing into the realm of hundreds of thousands of years. In such a remote and barren landscape, the immediate question was inevitable: who could have built an industrial piping system in an era before recorded human civilization? The speculation that followed was as vast as the landscape itself, ranging from the ruins of a lost, advanced society to the far more dramatic idea of an extraterrestrial outpost, using the mountain as a facility for processing materials from the lake. The visual narrative is powerful, a network of metal conduits woven into the bones of the earth, silent and purposeless in a human era. Yet, geology possesses a patient, creative genius that often mirrors our own. The most widely accepted scientific explanation for the Baigong pipes points not to industry, but to a fascinating natural process. They are likely examples of what geologists call iron pipe concretions, or, in some cases, fossilized root casts. Here is how such a wonder can form naturally over immense periods. In ancient times, when the area was not a mountain but perhaps a wetland or forest, the roots of large trees could have penetrated deep into the sediment. When those trees died, the organic material of the roots decayed, leaving behind hollow tubes in the soil. Over millions of years, mineral-rich groundwater, carrying dissolved iron and silica, would have percolated through these hollow spaces. Gradually, the minerals precipitated out of the water, coating the inside of the tube, layer by microscopic layer, eventually filling it completely with a hard, pipe-like structure of iron oxide and stone. The surrounding sediment, under immense pressure, would have solidified into rock, and later tectonic forces could have lifted the entire formation into the mountain we see today. Erosion then exposed these mineral-filled tubes, making them look like manufactured pipes welded into the stone. The straight lines and right angles are not evidence of engineering, but a reflection of the original growth patterns of the root systems and the fractures in the ancient rock through which the mineral-rich water flowed. This natural explanation does not diminish the awe of the Baigong pipes, it transforms it. They become monuments to a different kind of maker, the slow, alchemical workshop of geological time. They showcase how natural processes, given enough millennia, can produce forms of breathtaking regularity and complexity, forms that trick our pattern-seeking minds into seeing the handiwork of intelligence. This artifact, or rather, this natural formation, serves as a critical lesson in our entire exploration. It reminds us that the world is capable of creating its own profound mysteries without the need for ancient astronauts or lost factories. The true wonder lies in understanding the mechanism, in recognizing that the mountain itself can be the craftsman, weaving iron and stone into puzzles for us to decipher. The Baigong pipes challenge us to look deeper, to appreciate not only the possibility of forgotten history, but also the immense creative power of the planet we call home. a power that writes its own enigmatic stories in stone and metal across the ages. The ocean floor holds stories we have only begun to read. South of Japan, near the remote island of Yonaguni, divers exploring the clear waters made a discovery that blurs the line between geology and architecture. Lying about 80 feet beneath the surface is a massive formation, a complex of rock that stretches for hundreds of feet. It is not a random collection of stones. The structure, now called the Yonaguni Monument, presents a landscape of startling features. There are vast, flat terraces that look like paved plazas. Sharp, 90-degree angles cut between rock faces. There are what appear to be wide steps leading from one level to another, and towering pillars that stand like sentinels in the deep. From certain angles, the entire formation resembles a grand, stepped pyramid or the ruins of a ceremonial complex, now silent and covered in coral. The immediate, breathtaking question is obvious. Is this a natural wonder, or are we looking at the sunken ruins of a civilization lost to rising seas? The debate surrounding Yonaguni is a perfect dialogue between two ways of seeing the world. Most geologists who have studied the site point to its bedrock, a type of sandstone that fractures along straight planes due to its internal layering. They explain that the powerful tidal currents in this region act like a natural sandblaster, eroding the stone along these natural fault lines. Over thousands of years, this relentless underwater erosion could sculpt the flat platforms, the sharp edges, and even the stair-like formations, all through entirely natural mechanical processes. The ocean, in this view, is a patient and powerful sculptor, capable of creating awe-inspiring geometries without any human intervention. Yet, for other researchers, the collective arrangement of these features feels too intentional to dismiss. They point to specific elements that seem to defy simple geology, like two round holes drilled into a rock face at precise intervals, or a trench that runs in a perfectly straight line for a considerable distance. The most striking feature is a large, isolated boulder that rests on a carved-out platform, its shape and placement seeming to defy the logic of natural settlement. These observers argue that while the stone itself is natural, its form has been modified, that human hands worked to accentuate the natural lines, carving steps where erosion began, squaring off corners, and creating a sacred space from the living rock. If this interpretation is correct, the implications are profound. During the last ice age, sea levels were nearly 400 feet lower than they are today. The area around Yonaguni would have been dry land, a coastal plain or a hill overlooking a very different shoreline. A culture living there could have indeed built upon this sandstone outcrop. Then, as the glaciers melted and the oceans rose, their world would have been slowly, inexorably swallowed, the monument abandoned to the encroaching waves over millennia. This is the haunting power of the Yonaguni Formation. It does not offer a clear answer. Instead, it presents a Rorschach test etched in stone at the bottom of the sea. When you look at its terraces, do you see the predictable patterns of sedimentary fracturing, or do you see the ghost of a plaza where people once gathered? When you see its steps, do you see the stair-step pattern of natural erosion, or do you see a path deliberately carved for ceremonial ascent? The monument's true mystery may lie in this very ambiguity. It forces us to confront the limits of our categories. Nature can create forms of breathtaking symmetry, and ancient humans were masters at working with the natural world, shaping prominent landscapes into places of meaning. Yonaguni could be a magnificent example of either, or perhaps a rare fusion of both. It stands as a silent, submerged question, a reminder that the most compelling history is sometimes not found in libraries, but lying in wait beneath the waves, waiting for us to decide whether we are seeing a world we lost, or simply learning to see the artistry of the planet itself in a new and deeper way. A stone bowl rests in a museum in La Paz, and its surface tells two different stories. The Fuente Magna bowl was reportedly discovered by a farmer in the 1950s near the shores of Lake Titicaca, the high-altitude sea of the Andes. It is a large ceremonial vessel carved from a single block of stone, and at first glance it belongs entirely to the ancient cultures of the Altiplano. But look closer and the story fractures. Etched into its interior are rows of intricate symbols. To some researchers, these are not abstract local designs. They bear a startling resemblance to two of the oldest writing systems in the world, Sumerian cuneiform and even earlier Proto-Sumerian script. The implications of this identification are nothing short of seismic. It would mean that a form of writing developed in the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia, over 6,000 miles away, somehow found its way to the high plains of South America, perhaps thousands of years before any known transoceanic contact. This single artifact proposes a bridge between two cradles of civilization that history insists never knew the other existed. The translations offered by proponents are as specific as they are astonishing. Some epigraphers have interpreted the symbols as a dedicatory text, a prayer to a mother goddess, using grammatical structures and vocabulary that echo known Sumerian inscriptions. If correct, the bowl becomes a sacred object, a piece of Mesopotamian ritual carried across unimaginable distances and deposited on another continent. It suggests a voyage of epic, forgotten scale, or perhaps the migration of a group of people carrying their language and their gods with them into a new world. The very idea rewrites the map of ancient human connection, turning the vast oceans from barriers into potential highways for the bold. Yet, the Fuente Magna bowl is perhaps the most fiercely contested artifact on our entire list, and for critical reasons that go to the heart of historical methodology. The primary challenge is its provenance. Unlike an object excavated by archaeologists in a documented dig, the bowl's discovery story is vague. It appeared without a clear archaeological context, the precise layer of earth and associated artifacts that would allow scientists to date it and confirm its origin. This lack of a secure paper trail makes it incredibly vulnerable to skepticism. Many mainstream archaeologists and linguists flatly reject the cuneiform interpretation. They argue the symbols are more likely a local, pre-Columbian art style, perhaps geometric patterns or proto-writing that coincidentally resembles Middle Eastern script. They point out that the human mind is predisposed to find patterns, and that seeing familiar shapes in unfamiliar places is a common cognitive bias, especially when we hope to find a connection. The controversy surrounding the bowl illustrates the immense stakes involved when an artifact threatens to overturn foundational narratives. For those who champion it, it is a key to a hidden history of global exploration. For the academic establishment, it is an unproven anomaly that fails the rigorous tests of peer-reviewed verification. This tension is not a flaw in the process, but its essential function. It forces every claim to be tested, every symbol to be scrutinized. The bowl's true lesson may not be about Sumerians in Bolivia, but about the fragile nature of evidence itself. It represents the dream of a connected ancient world, a dream etched in stone, waiting for a key that may never be found, or may have been in front of us all along, simply speaking a language we have not yet learned to hear. The search for life beyond our world often begins with a rock falling from the sky. In the year 2012, a team of researchers published a paper that sent shockwaves through both the out-of-place artifact community and the field of astrobiology. They claimed to have found, within a meteorite recovered in Sri Lanka, something extraordinary: microscopic fossilized algae. These were not just strange minerals, but structures that appeared to be the petrified remains of single-celled organisms, complete with cell walls and internal features. The meteorite itself was classified as a carbonaceous chondrite, a primitive type of space rock known to contain organic compounds, the building blocks of life. If the claims were true, the implications were universe-altering. It would be the first concrete evidence of extraterrestrial life, and it would powerfully support the theory of panspermia, the idea that life or its precursors can travel between planets, hitchhiking on comets and asteroids. This Sri Lankan meteorite, therefore, represented more than an artifact. It was a potential messenger carrying within it the secret that we are not alone, and that life itself might be a cosmic traveler. The excitement surrounding this discovery is easy to understand. It speaks to one of humanity's oldest and most profound questions. Are we the only living things in this vast cosmos? Finding fossilized algae in a rock from space would suggest that life is not a rare, miraculous accident confined to Earth, but a common, perhaps inevitable, process that can arise elsewhere and be scattered across the galaxy. It bridges the gap between earthly mysteries and celestial ones, suggesting that some out-of-place artifacts might not be out of our time, but out of our world entirely. The idea is compelling, a narrative that connects the dots between the organic chemistry found in nebulae and the first stirrings of biology on our own planet. It transforms a simple stone into a potential seed pod for an entire biosphere. However, the mainstream scientific response to these claims has been one of intense and methodical skepticism. This critical scrutiny is not a dismissal of the possibility, but a fundamental part of the scientific process. Experts in meteoritics and paleobiology have raised several major concerns. The first and most significant is the possibility of terrestrial contamination. A meteorite, once it lands on Earth, is immediately exposed to our environment. It rolls in soil, gets washed by rain, and can be colonized by modern microbes and fungi within days or weeks. These earthly organisms can infiltrate the meteorite's cracks and pores, and over time, their remains can become mineralized, creating structures that look ancient and fossilized, but are in fact very recent hitchhikers from our own world. Distinguishing between a fossil that fell from space and a contaminant that climbed aboard after landing is an immense technical challenge. The second major point of contention lies in the interpretation of the structures themselves. The shapes identified as fossilized cells are incredibly tiny, often at the very limits of what microscopes can resolve. Skeptical scientists argue that the complex, non-biological processes of mineral crystallization can produce an astonishing array of forms that mimic biology with uncanny accuracy. Under the right conditions, minerals can form spheres, tubes, and filaments that look for all the world like cellular structures, but are purely inorganic in origin. Without distinct, unambiguous biological markers, like certain complex molecules or isotopic signatures unique to life processes, it is nearly impossible to definitively prove a biological origin. For the broader scientific community, the burden of proof for such an extraordinary claim is extraordinarily high, and as of now, the evidence from this meteorite has not met that universal standard. This artifact, therefore, sits at a fascinating crossroads. It is a case study in how the desire for a groundbreaking discovery meets the rigorous, often slow, gates of verification. It shows how out-of-place artifact research can fuel and inform larger debates like panspermia by providing physical objects for theorists to point to. Yet it also highlights the critical importance of context and contamination controls, lessons that apply to every mysterious object dug from the earth or pulled from the sky. The Sri Lankan meteorite does not close the door on the question of cosmic life. Instead, it opens a window onto the meticulous, careful work required to answer it. It reminds us that the most profound truths are often hidden not in grand declarations, but in the patient, quiet analysis of a speck of dust, a fragment of stone, and the timeless human hope to find a companion in the silent depths of space. A stone from the banks of the Loba River in southern Russia holds a different kind of technological ghost. In 2013, a fisherman discovered a curious pebble, smooth and oblong, but with a peculiar weight and texture. When he accidentally broke it open, the interior revealed something that stopped him cold. There, embedded within the rock, was a flat, wafer-like structure, crisscrossed with a pattern of fine lines and geometric shapes. To his eyes, and to many who later saw the photographs, it looked unmistakably like a modern microchip, a piece of silicon circuitry sealed in stone for millions of years. This object, often called the Russian microchip, quickly became an internet sensation, presented as the ultimate out-of-place artifact, a piece of 21st century electronics impossibly trapped in deep time. The narrative was irresistible, suggesting a time traveler's lost device or evidence of a prehistoric advanced civilization. The visual evidence seemed stark and clear, a perfect square of ordered complexity imprisoned within a random, ancient matrix. This is the moment where wonder and interpretation collide. The true explanation, while less dramatic than time travel, opens a window into the breathtaking artistry of the natural world. Geologists and mineralogists who examined similar finds identified the object not as a microchip, but as a stunning example of a pseudofossil, a natural formation that mimics a manufactured or biological structure. The culprit in this case is most likely the mineral marcasite, a form of iron sulfide. Marcasite frequently crystallizes in flat, tabular formations, and it can grow in intricate, geometric patterns that resemble circuit boards, city grids, or even tiny, perfect honeycombs. When such a crystalline sheet forms within a nodule of softer rock, like clay or limestone, and that nodule is later broken open, the result is a sudden, shocking reveal, a pane of precise mineral geometry that looks utterly artificial. The process is one of pure, unguided chemistry, where molecules arrange themselves according to the rigid laws of crystal structure, repeating patterns over and over until they create a miniature landscape of straight lines and right angles. This artifact, perhaps more than any other, serves as a profound metaphor for our entire journey. It demonstrates the powerful human tendency to see our own reflection in the deep past. We live in an age defined by silicon and circuitry, so when we encounter a geometric pattern in stone, our minds instantly map it onto the most familiar template we possess. The Russian microchip is not evidence of ancient computers, but evidence of a cognitive bias, a testament to how our contemporary world shapes the stories we tell about history. It challenges us to look beyond the initial, thrilling assumption and appreciate the alternative marvel. Before there were engineers, there was chemistry, and chemistry is capable of designs of stunning regularity and beauty. The stone asks us to expand our definition of craftsmanship, to recognize that the planet itself is a factory, producing intricate forms over eons without need of a blueprint or a conscious maker. Its legacy is a lesson in humility and perspective. It reminds us that the past is not a mirror, but a vast and varied landscape, filled with wonders that are strange not because they are out of place, but because we have forgotten how to see the world through anything but our own technologically framed eyes. The human face is a canvas for the soul, but what if that face is not quite human? In the dust of ancient Mesopotamia, archaeologists unearthed a collection of figurines that quietly challenge our assumptions about early art and belief. These are the Ubaid Lizardmen, crafted by the Ubaid culture, a people who flourished in the region over 7,000 years ago, long before the rise of Sumer or Babylon. The figurines are small, made of clay, and depict humanoid bodies, often in dynamic poses, some holding infants, others in what seems like a posture of reverence or authority. But it is their heads that arrest the eye. They are elongated with pronounced slanted eyes, wide mouths, and a complete absence of a nose, giving them an unmistakably reptilian or lizard-like appearance. To a modern viewer, the effect is jarring, even unsettling. These are not the stylized human forms we expect from early agricultural societies. They seem to depict something else entirely, a blend of person and creature that feels pulled from a different kind of story. The immediate, speculative leap is a dramatic one. Could these be literal representations of a non-human intelligence, a record of an ancient encounter with beings not of this world? The visual echo is powerful, feeding directly into narratives of ancient astronauts or forgotten species. Yet, to stop at this interpretation is to miss the deeper, more culturally rich mystery they represent. Scholars of Mesopotamian prehistory see in these figurines not evidence of extraterrestrials, but a profound window into the spiritual world of the Ubaid people. The prevailing interpretation is that these are depictions of deities or perhaps priests wearing elaborate ceremonial masks. In many early cultures, animals were not just beasts but powerful symbols, embodiments of divine attributes. The lizard or the serpent, with its ability to shed its skin, was a potent symbol of regeneration, healing, and transformation. A priest taking on the visage of such a creature during a ritual would be channeling that power, becoming a bridge between the human community and the forces of nature and rebirth. The figurines holding infants might then represent a deity of fertility or a protector of childbirth, their alien features meant to convey a supernatural, otherworldly benevolence. This explanation transforms the figurines from potential evidence of the fantastic into a testament to the sophisticated symbolic language of our ancestors. They remind us that ancient art was rarely about literal representation. It was a code, a way of compressing complex spiritual concepts into tangible form. What looks to us like a lizardman was to an Ubaid artisan a way to visualize the divine's transformative power, its essential difference from the mundane human form. The true fascination of these objects lies in this gap in perception. They force us to confront the vast distance between their original cultural context and our own. We live in an age where reptilian features in humanoid form are staples of science fiction, loaded with specific connotations of alienness or threat. The Ubaid people lived in a world where the boundary between human, animal, and God was fluid and permeable. Their art reflects that fluidity, a world view where putting on the face of a lizard was not a mark of the alien, but a step closer to the sacred. These silent clay figures, then, are messengers from a lost mindset. They do not likely document an encounter with unknown beings, but they do document something equally profound: the human capacity to imagine the divine in forms that transcend our own biology. They are a whisper from a time when the mysteries of life, death, and renewal were painted not in theological texts, but shaped in wet clay, given the slanted eyes of a creature that renews itself, and placed in the earth as a permanent prayer for continuity. In their strange, compelling faces, we see not visitors from the stars, but the reflection of our own ancestors or before the enduring, enigmatic cycles of the natural world. A small, dark disc from Colombia carries images that feel pulled from a modern medical textbook. Known as the genetic disc, this artifact is carved from a single piece of lyddite, an exceptionally hard black stone. On its surface, in clear and deliberate relief, are scenes that depict the very beginnings of life. One section shows a sperm cell approaching an ovum in a moment of fertilization. Another illustrates the stages of embryonic and fetal development, with a curled form growing in clear, sequential steps. The accuracy is startling, displaying a level of biological understanding that, according to conventional history, should not have existed in the pre-Columbian world. This disc does not show gods or symbolic animals. It shows cellular processes, the unseen mechanics of human creation rendered in enduring stone. The immediate question is as profound as it is simple. How could an ancient culture know what we only discovered with powerful microscopes centuries later? The artifact taps directly into one of the most compelling themes of all out-of-place artifact research: the apparent depiction of advanced scientific knowledge millennia ahead of its time. It suggests a society that may have possessed not just artistic skill, but a deep, investigative curiosity about the inner workings of life itself, a curiosity we typically associate with the modern age. The mystery of the disc is magnified by the material from which it is made. Lyddite is notoriously difficult to work, requiring diamond-tipped tools or advanced abrasives to carve with such fine detail. The craftsmanship alone is a puzzle, indicating either a remarkable, patient technique lost to history or a technology we do not attribute to its time. The scenes are not crude sketches, they are precise, instructional diagrams. This leads to the central debate that surrounds the object. Skeptics argue forcefully that the genetic disc is likely a modern creation, a clever fake designed to appeal to our fascination with ancient mysteries and scientific anomaly. They point to the lack of a clear archaeological provenance, as its discovery story is not well documented by academic institutions. The style, they note, is utterly unique, bearing no resemblance to other known artistic traditions of the region. Could it be the work of a talented 20th-century artist with access to biology textbooks, creating an object meant to provoke and puzzle? This is a perfectly plausible explanation, one that places the disc in the same category as the Ica Stones, a potential modern narrative carved in ancient-seeming materials. Yet, even if it were a modern fake, its enduring power lies in the story it tells about us. It reflects our own deep desire to find our current knowledge mirrored in the deep past, to see our ancestors not as primitive, but as fellow seekers who uncovered fundamental truths about existence. If, however, the disc is genuinely ancient, its implications are quietly revolutionary. It would mean that a culture, through observation, intuition, or perhaps a forgotten investigative tradition, arrived at a sophisticated understanding of human reproduction. They may have conceptualized life not as a magical event, but as a process with distinct, observable stages. This would represent a monumental shift in how we view the intellectual history of the Americas, suggesting schools of biological thought that flourished and then vanished without a trace. Whether ancient artifact or modern enigma, the genetic disc serves a crucial purpose. It holds up a dark, polished mirror to our assumptions about the progression of knowledge. It asks us to consider if the timeline of discovery is a single, bright line, or a scattered constellation of insights, many of which glowed briefly in distant cultures before being lost to the long night of time, waiting to be independently rediscovered centuries later. The disc is not merely a picture of a fetus, it is a question about the nature of understanding itself. The ruins of Mohenjo-Daro hold a different kind of mystery, one written not in objects but in the very fabric of its walls. This ancient city of the Indus Valley civilization, a marvel of urban planning dating back over 4,000 years, presents archaeologists with a peculiar and localized phenomenon. In certain areas of the site, the clay bricks and pottery fragments are not merely cracked or blackened by fire, they are fused together, their surfaces transformed into a smooth, glassy material. This process, known as vitrification, occurs when silicate materials like sand or clay are subjected to temperatures so intense they melt and then solidify again as a kind of primitive glass. At Mohenjo-Daro, these vitrified patches are scattered, as if pockets of the city were briefly subjected to a furnace-like heat far beyond that of a typical structural fire. The immediate question is one of cause. What force could generate such focused, extreme temperatures in a Bronze Age city? Mainstream archaeology offers several grounded explanations. One leading theory points to a massive, catastrophic fire, perhaps fueled by large stores of oil or grain within the city's granaries, burning with such ferocity that it achieved the heat necessary to vitrify the surrounding materials. Another possibility involves repeated lightning strikes on the same area over centuries, each bolt superheating the ground and gradually transforming the brickwork. There is also the consideration of industrial activity, as the inhabitants of Mohenjo-Daro were skilled metallurgists. A large-scale, out-of-control smelting operation could potentially create a localized inferno capable of such effects. These explanations are plausible, rooted in known phenomena, and fit within the established understanding of the city's history, which shows signs of gradual decline and eventual abandonment. However, the unique appearance of the vitrified stone has inspired a far more dramatic and controversial narrative. In the mid-20th century, some researchers observing the site noted that the fused and melted materials bore a disturbing resemblance to the effects witnessed at Hiroshima and Nagasaki after the atomic detonations. The vitrified crust looked akin to trinitite, the glassy residue formed on desert sand by the heat of nuclear tests. This visual parallel sparked a speculative theory that Mohenjo-Daro might have been destroyed by some form of ancient atomic weapon, a cataclysm so complete it entered legend and was later forgotten. This claim, while captivating, is almost universally rejected by the archaeological community. Experts point out that the vitrified zones are limited and do not show the widespread, uniform destruction a nuclear blast would cause. There is no evidence of the radiation signature such an event would leave behind, nor any historical or textual tradition from the region that describes such an unimaginable catastrophe. The theory is seen as a classic case of interpreting ancient evidence through the lens of modern fears and technologies, a pattern we have seen before. Yet, the enduring discussion around Mohenjo-Daro's vitrified ruins serves a purpose far more valuable than proving an ancient apocalypse. It perfectly illustrates the powerful dialogue between physical evidence and human imagination. When we encounter something in the past that we cannot immediately explain with familiar causes, our minds reach for narratives that can contain the anomaly. In the atomic age, the most potent symbol of sudden, total destruction is the nuclear blast, so it becomes a ready-made template for explaining mysterious devastation. The ruins become a Rorschach test, revealing more about our own contemporary anxieties than about the Indus Valley's fate. This artifact, or rather this condition of the site, challenges us to separate observation from interpretation. The vitrification is real, a genuine physical puzzle. The stories we build to explain it, however, are cultural creations shaped by the knowledge and myths of our own time. Mohenjo-Daro stands not as proof of ancient warfare with unthinkable weapons, but as a monument to the human need to find cause in catastrophe, to weave a story from shattered bricks and glazed stone, seeking meaning in the silent aftermath of a disaster whose true nature may remain, like the glassy crust itself, permanently fused to the mysteries of deep time. Sometimes the most mysterious artifact is the one we think we understand. In the late 19th century, at a coal mine in Wolfsegg, Austria, workers splitting a large block of coal made a curious find. Inside the dense black carbon was a cube, a solid, heavy object of iron with a distinct groove running around its middle. Its edges were slightly rounded, but its shape was unmistakably geometric, a perfect cube that felt out of place in the ancient, compressed plant matter. This object, often confused with other similar finds and sometimes called the Salzburg Cube, became an immediate sensation. Here was an object of obvious manufacture, it seemed, trapped in coal formed millions of years before humans walked the earth. The implications were as clear as they were thrilling. It pointed to an impossible industry in deep time, a forgotten civilization or perhaps visitors from beyond, leaving behind this metallic token. For decades, it served as a prime example of an out-of-place artifact, a physical challenge to the entire timeline of human progress. Its story, however, did not end with that initial gasp of discovery. The cube's journey from mystery to explanation is a masterclass in how these puzzles are often resolved. As its fame grew, it attracted more than just wonder. it attracted rigorous scientific scrutiny. Researchers subjected the iron to detailed metallurgical analysis. The results were definitive. The cube was not made of meteoric iron, which would have been a natural, if rare, possibility. Instead, it was cast iron, a man-made alloy produced in blast furnaces. Furthermore, the specific shape and the encircling groove were identified not as alien geometry, but as characteristic of a common piece of 19th-century mining equipment, likely a broken support rod or a weight from machinery itself. The most plausible explanation emerged not from a lost world, but from the very recent past. A piece of mining equipment from an earlier, abandoned shaft could have fallen into a crevice. Over time, under the immense pressure and chemical conditions of the mine, minerals and coal slurry could have concreted around it, forming a new, hard shell that perfectly mimicked the appearance of a solid block of ancient coal. The original discovery was not made by geologists documenting an undisturbed stratum, but by workers in an active industrial site, a context where the precise history of the rock was already complex and layered. The Salzburg Cube thus transformed from a world-shattering anomaly into a powerful lesson in patience and perspective. It stands not as proof of ancient smiths, but as a testament to the necessity of methodical inquiry. Its narrative encapsulates the entire cycle we have seen again and again, the thrilling discovery that ignites the imagination, followed by the slow, careful work of science that seeks a simpler, more grounded truth. This resolution does not diminish the cube's value, it enhances it. The cube teaches us that the true purpose of investigating these mysteries is not to prove a predetermined idea, but to follow the evidence wherever it leads. It underscores a common resolution for many objects that sparked the out-of-place artifact phenomenon in the 19th century. They were often born from incomplete initial information, from a moment when the context was lost or misunderstood. Their stories were solved not by dismissing curiosity, but by applying persistent, disciplined inquiry. The cube's legacy is a quiet reminder that the past is full of surprises, but not all surprises rewrite history. Some simply remind us to look closer, to question our first assumptions, and to appreciate that sometimes the most fascinating story is not about what we found, but about how we learned what it truly was. Even the most celebrated historical record can hold a tiny, overlooked puzzle. The Bayeux Tapestry is a monumental work of narrative art, an embroidered chronicle nearly 230 feet long that tells the story of the Norman conquest of England in 1066. It is a detailed and vibrant account of betrayal, battle, and the fall of a kingdom, stitched with political purpose for the victors. Yet, in one corner of this vast fabric, a small panel draws the modern eye with an irresistible pull. It shows a group of men gathered outside a building, their faces turned upward, their fingers pointing toward the sky. Above them floats an object, a rounded, cupola-like shape with trailing flames or streamers, looking for all the world like a child's drawing of a flying saucer. This image, labeled in Latin as a star, has become a focal point for a fascinating debate about how we interpret the past. To the tapestry's creators and its medieval audience, this object almost certainly represented Halley's Comet, which blazed across the skies of Europe in the spring of 1066, a celestial omen recorded by chroniclers of the time as a portent of great change. The comet's appearance was woven into the story as a divine sign, foreshadowing the downfall of King Harold. The artistic style of the era was not photorealistic. It was symbolic and stylized, meant to convey meaning quickly and clearly to a largely illiterate populace. A flaming star with a tail was depicted in a way that made narrative sense within the tapestry's visual language. However, when viewed through a contemporary lens, shaped by decades of science fiction and UFO iconography, the stylized comet undergoes a perceptual shift. Its domed top, its seemingly solid structure, and the animated reaction of the figures below feel eerily familiar. This has led some researchers and enthusiasts to propose the tapestry as early evidence of an unidentified flying object, a literal craft witnessed and recorded by the people of the 11th century. This interpretation transforms a historical document into a potential eyewitness account of the extraordinary. The Bayeux Tapestry anomaly is a perfect example of how the out-of-place artifact concept extends beyond physical objects into the realm of iconography and art. Here, the artifact is not a buried battery or a carved stone, but an image, a story told in thread. The mystery lies not in its material, but in its meaning. This case highlights the critical importance of cultural and artistic context. To understand the image, we must step into the worldview of the people who made it. For them, the heavens were a canvas of divine communication. Comets, eclipses, and unusual celestial events were not astronomical phenomena to be coolly analyzed. They were messages, warnings, and signs imbued with spiritual significance. The tapestry's craftsmen were not attempting to document a technological marvel. They were weaving a theological and political argument, using the comet as a narrative device to show God's favor shifting from Harold to William. The modern UFO interpretation, while compelling, often strips the image of this rich medieval context, projecting our own cultural anxieties and fascinations onto a very different symbolic landscape. The true lesson of this embroidered anomaly is not about proving medieval sightings, but about the flexibility of human perception across time. It demonstrates how the same visual information can tell two completely different stories, separated by a chasm of centuries and belief. The tapestry asks us to consider the lens through which we view history. Are we seeing what the artists intended us to see, a flaming star sent by God? Or are we seeing a reflection of our own era's mysteries, a pattern we recognize because it is written in the cultural language we now speak? This small panel, stitched among scenes of ships and soldiers, becomes a mirror. It reflects not a craft in the sky, but the enduring human tendency to look upward and search for meaning, whether in the divine signs of a comet or the enigmatic possibilities of something unknown. It reminds us that sometimes the most intriguing out-of-place artifact is not an object out of time, but an idea out of context, a reminder that the past must always be read in its own handwriting, even when that writing is sewn in brightly colored wool. A final artifact draws its mystery from light and shadow, from the very substance of faith itself. The Shroud of Turin is for millions a sacred relic, the burial cloth of a central figure in the Christian tradition. Yet, beyond its profound religious significance, it presents one of the most enduring and scientifically complex puzzles in the world of out-of-place artifacts. This length of linen, measuring over 14 feet long, bears the faint, straw-colored imprint of a man who appears to have suffered the injuries of crucifixion. But this is no ordinary painting or stain. The image possesses characteristics that seem to defy the artistic and scientific knowledge of any era before our own. When first photographed in 1898, the negative plate revealed a shocking detail. The faint markings on the cloth produced a perfectly clear, positive photographic image on the negative, as if the shroud itself were a photographic negative created centuries before the invention of the camera. This discovery propelled the cloth from the realm of purely religious devotion into an arena of intense scientific scrutiny. The central and most debated scientific finding came in 1988, when radiocarbon dating tests were performed on a small sample. 3 independent laboratories concluded the linen dated to between 1260 and 1390 of the Common Era, squarely within the medieval period. For many, this was the definitive answer, proof the shroud was a clever, albeit inexplicably sophisticated, medieval creation. Yet the mystery refused to dissolve. Researchers who questioned the dating pointed to potential contamination. The sample taken came from a corner of the cloth that had been handled, mended, and exposed to smoke and fire over centuries, factors that could have introduced newer carbon and skewed the results. They argued that the complex chemistry of the image itself presented a far greater puzzle than its age. The image is not painted with any known pigment. It resides only on the very topmost microfibers of the linen threads, with no capillary action, no brushstrokes, and no directionality. It appears more like a scorch, but one achieved at a molecular level without charring the cloth, a result that modern science has struggled to replicate perfectly. Some experiments suggest a short, intense burst of radiant energy, something like a flash of light, could have created such a superficial, detailed imprint. This idea, while speculative, highlights the core of the shroud's enigma. How was this image made? If it is a medieval artifact, the creator possessed a knowledge of anatomy, a technique for creating a perfect photographic negative, and a chemical process that remains elusive to this day. If the image has an earlier origin, then the radiocarbon dating remains an unresolved contradiction. The shroud ultimately transcends the simple categories of real or fake. It exists in a space where faith seeks physical evidence and science encounters a phenomenon that resists its standard tools. It is a mirror reflecting our own methods of inquiry. For the believer, it may be a tangible connection to the sacred. For the scientist, it is an exceptionally stubborn data set. For the historian of mysteries, it is the ultimate case study in ambiguity. It demonstrates that some artifacts do not provide answers, but instead deepen the questions, forcing a dialogue between different ways of knowing. The shroud does not tell us what happened. It asks us across the centuries to consider the limits of our understanding and to sit with the quiet, profound possibility that some stories are woven not just into history, but into the very fibers of the world, waiting for a light we have not yet learned how to cast. Across this journey, a pattern begins to take shape in the scattered evidence. These 30 artifacts are not isolated curiosities, but pieces of a much larger conversation, one that echoes across centuries. When we step back from the individual mysteries, several powerful themes emerge, connecting objects separated by continents and millennia. The first and most compelling is the recurring whisper of lost high technology. From the intricate gears of the Antikythera Mechanism to the potential electrical charge of the Baghdad Battery and the advanced metallurgy suggested by the Aiud Wedge, we repeatedly encounter objects that seem to demand a level of technical sophistication our history books do not grant their eras. This theme speaks to a deep human fascination with the idea of a golden age, a time when knowledge flourished only to be swallowed by catastrophe or the slow erosion of time. It asks us to consider if progress is always a straight line, or if it can be a cycle with peaks of understanding that later generations must painfully rebuild. Closely linked is the tantalizing possibility of ancient global exploration. The Piri Reis Map, the Maine Penny, the Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca Head, and even the controversial Fuente Magna Bowl all hint at a world far more connected in antiquity than we assume. They suggest that oceans were not absolute barriers, but challenges occasionally met by intrepid, unrecorded voyagers. This theme challenges the isolation we often project onto ancient cultures, proposing instead a narrative of sporadic but profound contact, where ideas, goods, and artistic styles could travel vast distances along forgotten trade routes or through chance encounters lost to all but a single surviving artifact. Yet, our examination reveals another, equally important thread: the human tendency to project our own world onto the ancient unknown. We see this clearly in the Quimbaya Artifacts, where the elegant forms of nature are interpreted by a modern eye as jet planes, or in the Bayeux Tapestry, where a stylized comet becomes a flying saucer. Our minds are pattern-seeking engines wired to find the familiar. When we encounter the strange, we instinctively map it onto the templates of our own time, whether that template is advanced machinery, extraterrestrial visitors, or advanced weaponry. This is not a flaw, but a fundamental part of how we seek to understand. It means that every out-of-place artifact is viewed through a double lens, the original intent of its maker and the contemporary worldview of its interpreter. This leads directly to the final, unifying theme, the constant, dynamic tension between mainstream interpretation and alternative theory. For nearly every artifact we have explored, there exists a dual narrative. One is grounded in conventional archaeology, geology, and history, often offering a more conservative explanation like natural concretion, modern intrusion, or symbolic religious art. The other narrative pushes at the boundaries, suggesting forgotten civilizations, unprecedented knowledge, or even extraterrestrial influence. This battle is not a weakness of the field, but its very engine. It is the rigorous skepticism of the scientific method meeting the boundless curiosity of the human spirit. It forces every claim to be tested, every assumption to be questioned, and ensures that no mystery is ever settled too easily. Ultimately, these common threads reveal something profound and perhaps unexpected. They tell us less about the definitive reality of the ancient world and far more about our own timeless desires. These artifacts are mirrors. In our fascination with lost technology, we see our own awe at human ingenuity and a fear that such brilliance can be ephemeral. In the search for ancient explorers, we see our own longing for connection and adventure, a hope that the human story is one of bold curiosity. In our interpretations, we see the reflection of our own era's hopes, fears, and technological wonders. And in the debate itself, we see our enduring need to question, to probe, and to never fully accept that the story has all been told. These objects, in the end, are not just puzzles to be solved. They are invitations to wonder, to remain humble in the face of the vast, unknown past, and to keep asking the one question that drives all discovery: what if? These objects, from the intricate to the inexplicable, have painted a landscape far richer than any single timeline could contain. Our journey reveals a world where mystery is not a flaw in the record, but a fundamental part of the human story. For every artifact with a plausible, conventional explanation, another lingers in the shadows of ambiguity, its secrets refusing to be fully settled by science or skepticism. This is the true nature of the out-of-place artifact. It exists not to provide a final answer, but to provoke a permanent question. What they collectively challenge is not necessarily the entire edifice of history, but something more personal, our intellectual humility. They are quiet tutors, reminding us that the past is not a closed book, but a library with countless rooms still unexplored, and that our current understanding is always and only provisional. The greatest discovery we make in examining these puzzles may not be about ancient civilizations at all, but about ourselves. We are the ones drawn to the anomaly, to the piece that does not fit. The human mind is perhaps the ultimate artifact, forever searching the attic of time, questioning the handed-down stories, and trying to piece together the grand, fragmented mosaic of who we are and where we came from. This drive to connect, to wonder, and to look beyond the accepted page is our shared legacy. If this exploration into history's quiet corners has intrigued you, there are countless more mysteries waiting. Consider subscribing for deeper dives into the puzzles that shape our understanding of the world. And we would love to hear from you. Which of these 30 artifacts did you find most compelling and why? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's continue the conversation.